Welcome to the Essence of Recovery, a podcast from the Athens area Commencement Center, a place for honest stories and real conversations about healing, growth, and the moments that shape us. In each episode, we sit down with individuals in recovery, their families, and professionals in the field to uncover the wisdom, challenges, breakthroughs, and everyday practices that make recovery possible. From the long-standing traditions of 12-step programs to alternative approaches and innovative models, we want to understand not just how people recover, but what recovery means in their lives. We're your hosts, Brendan Leahy.
And I'm Shauna Harris. In today's episode, we talk with Bobbie Ray, a woman with long-term sobriety who shares what it has taken to build and sustain a life in recovery over time. Bobbie Ray reflects on the early moments that set her on a different path, the practices that continue to support her sobriety, and the depth of meaning recovery holds for her today. Her story is steady, honest, and deeply hopeful, and I'm honored we get to share it with you. This is the Essence of Recovery. Theme music is provided by Shauna and the Jaywalkers.
When I cease to fight, when my soul calms down, when I sway with the tide, when my waves come and go, in the current of life, we give stay strong to the light inside of us all.
Your journey spans decades, and what's so powerful about it is not just the challenges, but the clarity and hope that came from them. To start, how would you introduce yourself today? Who is Bobbie in recovery?
I am Bobbie. I am an alcoholic. Today, Bobbie in recovery, I believe I'm a trustworthy person. I'm kind. Recovery is a part of who I am from the time I wake up till I go to bed at night. It's a part of my family. I'm fun.
Yes,
Sometimes
you are.
I wonder if, I think if I'm not feeling right inside, I'd say, if I wasn't me, would I be my friend? So that's kind of a judge. So I think I'm a good friend. And I'm happy. I have joy today.
Beautiful.
When you say recovery is part of your family, what does that mean?
My husband is not in Al-Anon. He was saved when I was 25, when I started drinking. He was saved in the church, and so he's a very spiritual person. Like every morning he'll say, "Are you going to the meeting today?" Because he has lunch with his fellow friends, and I go to meetings a lot or meet with sponsees. It's became a way of life for us.
Good. And so he's embraced it.
Yeah. And my son is also, he's in recovery. He will have 2 years in April.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So I've been able to be an influence to him.
Very
and
good.
To watch him, to watch him reach his bottom without having to say, you've got to do this, you must do this. Just try and attraction rather than promotion.
Yes. We were just talking about this before you came in. I have 3 boys, and you don't want to be preachy and tell them because it doesn't work, but
right.
you hope to be an example and show them and share the mistakes that's what I'm trying to do, is just
right.
share. Yeah.
Right.
So it is part of the family.
It is.
Very good.
So yeah, now that we're talking about family, let's go back a little bit. You've shared that your parents divorced when you were young.
Yes.
And your father struggled with alcoholism.
Yes. He didn't struggle. He was just a teetotal alcoholic.
Okay.
Yeah. He didn't fight it. He just was. That was what I was seeing anyway.
Okay. How did those early experiences shape your understanding of alcoholism and coping?
First of all, I don't know if I ever learned, I never learned any coping skills. Our way of life was secrets, hiding.
Yep.
We lived next to my grandparents, and so my daddy, because they were teetotalers, or so I thought at the time, and so Daddy would hide his beer cans up under the house. You know how that shaped me when I became an alcoholic. I hid my bottles so I could see myself.
Did you
and
hide
my
them under the
daddy.
house?
No, I didn't hide them under the house. I hid them everywhere in the house.
Inside.
Inside.
Okay.
In my teenage daughter's bedroom, in her closet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, thinking no one would suspect.
Thinking no one
It's
would
the perfect hiding
suspect.
spot.
Yeah.
That's right.
That makes sense.
But when they got a divorce, I was glad because of all of the arguing, all of the hiding and pretense. And we were going to live next to my cousin and my aunt and uncle. So that excited me. I was going to school with people I was going to church with. But I was ashamed of it. I was ashamed that my parents were divorced because all of my friends had both of their parents.
Right.
Yeah. And from the time they divorced when I was 11 and until my daddy passed away when I was 17, I saw him twice. So I believe that he chose alcohol over us. I didn't realize he didn't have a choice.
And how did he pass?
He had a massive heart attack. About probably a year or two before that, he had been in the hospital with the DTs, and that occurred quite often. In talking to someone in recovery after I got here, she was telling me all about the DTs, and so I did a little research and investigation, and the day he died, when I got to his house, my granny, where he lived, told me that he had been quit drinking for 2 days.
Just did it on his own.
Yes, so I believe that he died during the DTs.
Sure.
How did that affect you early on as a young woman?
You know, I had gotten married 3 weeks before he died. And after I started in the program, the first time I went to a counselor and he asked me something, he was talking about my wedding, and he said, "Your father didn't come to your wedding?" I said, "No. I didn't expect him to." So that's how shut down. Mm-hmm. I believe that Daddy, like I said, had chose alcohol over us when I was named after him. So I was the third of 3 girls. And I was told that Daddy started drinking about the time I was born. And he wanted a boy named after him. So I kind of went through life thinking that I was a failure from the start. I was a girl, and I was supposed to be a boy.
You had to
So
carry, you were carrying that.
And he started drinking. Yeah, so, yeah.
So your dad passes. You're a newlywed,
Very young.
very young,
17.
17 years old.
I got married the day after I graduated high school.
So you were looking to jump to the next phase of life.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's what I wanted. Once I met Randy, I met him on a blind date when I was 15, and I wanted to be a wife and a mother. That was my dream.
So it seems like a rough start with your dad, and then he passes. But you move on. You get married. Is everything good?
Everything's good. Everything's normal. When we had been married a couple of years, we decided we were ready to start a family, and I had my daughter when I was 19. I had my son when I was 22. I was young. You know, all of my friends from high school had gone on to college and did other things. That made me feel not less than, but I didn't feel normal because of the things that they were doing.
Right.
But I knew in my heart that that's what I wanted. I
Yes.
just wanted to be the best mother and the best wife.
So you were happy with your path, and things seemed to be
I was
going
happy
well.
with my path. I didn't drink very much. I drank for the first time when I was 14, but I didn't drink again, for a while. And my husband and I would go out with friends, and I would drink a drink, and I can remember leaving half a drink. I would drink wine sometimes. I do remember one particular instance. I don't know why that just came to me, but he always went to church on Wednesday night. And I was sitting on the front porch, and I had some wine in the refrigerator, and I thought it would be nice to have a glass of wine. And the thought went to my head, if you do that, you might be like your daddy.
Yeah, it was
That
it was
awareness
deep in there
was
somewhere.
Yeah, I was always told, you should never drink because you might be like your daddy.
Okay. So it sounds like you were fairly solid, and
Yeah.
you had an appropriate relationship with alcohol.
So then you mentioned that when you were 25, you got pneumonia. And your husband thought, well, I'm going to give you a shot of Jim Beam. That's going to help you feel better. And then what happened?
Which he regrets. But to me, that was probably the best day of my life because I had never felt like I belonged. I had always felt less than, dissatisfied, that hole in your chest that needs to be filled. And that's one thing I hadn't shared is how I felt about myself. I just didn't like myself. So I was always looking for something to make me feel better. So that night, I had just started working. My daughter was 6 and my son was 3, and I had decided to get a job. And I'd been working about 3 months, and I had pneumonia. And he worked for the railroad, and they had terrible reputations. Railroad men were known to be drinkers. So he had some fists of liquor, and he didn't drink very much. He had some fists of liquor in the cabinet, and I was coughing uncontrollably, and he gave me a shot. And when I drank it, it was just this warm, tingling, everything's going to be okay sensation. I went to sleep. I slept like a baby, and I couldn't wait till the next night. And
That's
I made
so relatable.
I made sure I was coughing that night so I could have some more,
Yes.
So he started having a drink every night with me. Like I said, my kids were 3 and 6, so we'd get them in the bed, and we called it a mule's ear, it was a jigger full that we would have every night. Eventually, I would have a jigger full while I was fixing his. But I had to mix it. I didn't like to mix it. So the one I had in secret was straight, but then the one I had with him was mixed. I was hiding it from the beginning.
So right away, you were kind of doing what your dad had taught you to do.
Absolutely hide it.
Yep.
Yeah.
When did drugs come into the picture?
But when I was 16, I smoked pot for the first time, but never smoked it regularly. But pot, I would smoke it with my sister, my middle sister, who's 3 years older than I am. She was my drinking and using buddy.
How much younger, older?
She's 3 years older.
3 years older.
And then I have a sister that's 8 years older that today is my best friend. We'd never had a relationship. She's never had a drink or drug. And we just have a ball now. We travel together
That's
or
wonderful.
whatnot. But so I would go by my sister's a lot, and we would smoke a joint. And I was kind of jealous of her because she was married to a druggie too. So she got to do all of this fun stuff. When I was 31, changed jobs, and the place that I ended up going to treatment when I was later on, I was there, and I met a girl, and eventually she told me she was a pot dealer. And I thought, wow, I could have my own. I could smoke as much as I wanted to. So that's when I was 31 is when I really became a pothead.
Well, did your husband know about the pot?
He did.
Okay.
And he didn't mind if I smoked some every once in a while. He could not smoke because of his job. And we were active in the church all of this time. So he was really doing the drinking at night, the smoking pot to please me,
Okay.
you know.
So it seems like you're turning down an avenue, but it seems kind of reasonable. You're having a drink or two. You're occasionally smoking pot. What happened? Was it building? Was it growing in terms of a problem?
Yeah, what were the first signs of unmanageability?
It was a continuous, it was a snowball. It was a slow snowball. Like I said, at first I just drank 1 jigger a night, 2 jiggers a night. Then I said, well, why can't I have one at 7 o'clock, right before Randy gets home? And then I started drinking after I got off work. Eventually I started, because I started drinking so much. I started drinking at lunch. I would go to the liquor store and buy my liquor, take it home. I lived close to where I worked, and take it home. By this time, I was having to hide bottles because I was drinking so much. For a while, you know, we kept it in the cabinet because that's where we kept it. The fits that his company bought gave him, that's where we kept it. So we kept it in a cabinet. Well, I would come home and I would drink some, and I started imagining that he was measuring it. And so I started, when I emptied the bottle, I would put apple cider vinegar in it. So one night we were left with only a bottle of the apple cider vinegar.
Oh, no.
And he said, are we going to have a drink tonight? No, we're not going to have one tonight. I was so scared that he was going to want one. I was just going to tell him the liquor turned to apple cider vinegar.
It's a miracle.
It is a miracle. So when I started sneaking, when I started not being honest about the amounts that I was drinking,
When the dishonesty began.
the dishonesty began. Right?
How good were you with the dishonesty?
I was good. I would keep my liquor. I would keep Tupperware glasses with tops on them. And so I would keep enough liquor in there. They were like 12-ounce cups. And I would keep enough liquor in there because at the end, and I'd say from the time I was 32 to 34, I was drinking a lot. I was drinking a lot of days of fifth of liquor. So I would sneak, pour part of the fifth into these cups, and I would keep him in my female products bag because I knew that he would not.
No one's going there.
No one's going there, right? So I would keep them there. Like I said, I would hide my bottles in my daughter's room. I would have to, my checking account became a mess. Our checking account, at first we had, the checking accounts together. It became a mess because by this time I had started buying pot. I was drinking a fifth of liquor a day. I mean, it was getting expensive.
Right.
So I was having to juggle the finances. I'd have to go home every day at lunch and get the mail, just in case we'd bounced a check or there was a late payment. I would always somehow maybe keep it, where it was just a month late, where we wouldn't be notified. At the end, I was writing checks. Eventually, I was taken off the checking account and opened my own account. And eventually, I had to close it because it was in such a mess.
And that's ironic because you said you're good with numbers and finance is your thing.
It is. And, it just so happened that the company I worked for, and I was a bookkeeper, but the company I worked for, we were audited monthly. And we were a contractor, and we received one check from them a month. And I think about, wow, I'm so grateful that I did not work at a place where I could actually embezzle money.
Right.
Because by this time I would have done anything, to get what I had to have.
So that must have been a tremendous burden. That's a lot of secrets, and there's a lot of effort.
Secrets.
Was that wearing on you?
It was. No one knew who I was.
That's exhausting.
It was
that
exhausting.
double life.
Yes. And to look at myself in the mirror.
Yep.
Oh, it was terrible. But I learned how to shut down, and that's what I learned from my childhood. You know, you act as if everything is okay. You know, you're still a good mom. You're still a good wife.
Right.
But it was all a pretense.
So it's rough. It's wearing on you, but you got it. You're working it. It's working for you. When did it start to not work?
Well, my husband and I would have arguments. I remember one day, with my mother too, we were camping, and we would have these groups of like 25 to 30 people go camping, and all of my family were drinkers. You know, we had a good time, and we drank. And we were sitting down by the lake, and my mother looked at me and she said, "Bobbie, don't you think you've had enough?"
Was that kind of a moment of clarity for you?
It was terrible, you know, because I knew how my dad had always been known as, he was just sorry. You know, people didn't know about alcoholism back then, and he was just sorry. Well, I was just like him. But yeah, and then one time,
So that was the first time somebody had acknowledged, I see you.
other than Randy,
Yeah.
yes, other than Randy. My daughter would tell me, my daughter and I shared a bathroom. So we would get dressed in the morning, and by this time I was drinking in the morning. I would get up and I would go to the closet and I'd have my drink. Sometimes it would stay down, sometimes it wouldn't. And so right there in front of my probably 14 to 16-year-old daughter, I would throw up. And then I would drink some more. And she'd say, "Mama, why did you do that?" And I couldn't answer her. I didn't know.
Were you struggling with withdrawal at that point? Is that why you were drinking in the morning?
Didn't think about it. I just did it.
Yeah.
Once I started something, we went camp. We were at the beach with my sister and her husband, the one that I drank with. One summer, this was probably a couple of summers before I came to AA the first time, and he had a Bloody Mary. And I thought, what's the difference? He's still drinking, you know. I don't want vodka, but he's still drinking. So I started drinking in the morning. But once I started something, I had no control. The obsession was there.
Yes.
So I didn't get up and think, am I going to drink this morning? Or I didn't go to bed and think, I'm not going to drink tomorrow. I just did it. It just was.
Did you, at this point in your life, did you try to quit? Did you try to moderate, try to control it?
I can remember my husband saying, "Can we just have one drink tonight?" Mm-hmm. And I'd say, "Yes, we can. I can just have one drink." And one night we were at my sister's. She was actually having an anniversary party for us, and I passed out. And he came up to the bedroom where I had passed out, and he said, "How do you get so drunk on one drink?" See, he had such faith in me.
He didn't know what was going on.
He had no clue what was going on, but he knew, but he didn't want to know.
What was your answer?
I don't remember. I was passed out.
You probably came up with a good one.
I was passed out. My bottom for me was the last year. It was 1989, and it was Christmas time. Mm-hmm. Christmas was like on Monday. Liquor stores were closed on Sunday. So I went to the liquor store Saturday and got a half a gallon and thought that would be enough to get me through till Tuesday morning when the liquor stores opened again. And I ran out of liquor on Christmas morning. That was the longest day. It was terrible. The next morning, my husband went to work the day after Christmas, and he went to work, and I thought, I think I'll go to the liquor store, and then I'm going to come home. I'm just going to have one drink, and then I will take down the Christmas decorations. So I went to the liquor store, And the next thing I knew, I woke up. And it was 2:00 in the afternoon, and I just had this strange sensation that something's going on here. So I went into the bedroom. I was in the recliner in the living room, and I went into the bedroom, and my husband was there. And he was laying down, and I woke him up. I said, "What are you doing? You're supposed to be at work." And he said, "I have the flu." And this is kind of emotional for me. And he said, "I tried to wake you up, but you wouldn't wake up." He said, "I thought you were dead." And at that point, for the first time ever, I think I really wanted to quit drinking. I wanted to be that wife and mother that I knew I wasn't any longer.
Was he angry or was he concerned? What was his approach?
Fed up.
Okay.
He was fed up. I wouldn't say angry. He had gotten mad at me before, but he was fed up. So that night when he woke up, he gave me the ultimatum. He said, "You're either going to get help or else I'm leaving." So I agreed that I would get help. And the next night when he got off, we went out to Charter Winds, which was the hospital that you went to, the one that I knew about.
Right.
We went to Charter Winds, and I talked with them, and they wanted me to stay inpatient. And I told them that I couldn't because nobody knew I drank, or so I thought.
Right.
So I agreed. They told me about AA, which I knew a little about it. My uncle had been in AA. So they told me about AA, and if I would go to meetings and see a psychiatrist, that I might have a chance to recover.
Okay. So you chose not to stay,
Chose not to stay.
and you were going to go your own route with the AA and a counselor.
Yes.
Tell me about your first meeting.
My first meeting, I walked in, and it was at the 7:30 Cobb. It was a speaker meeting, a birthday meeting. And one of our good friends from church, which I knew about Robert, I had grown up with him, and I knew that he had gotten sober because, he was known. And I knew he had gotten sober. And I walked into the room, and it was his birthday. He was very close to our preacher. Our preacher, we were very active in church at this time. I was a Sunday school teacher. I was teaching 3-year-olds, not 3-year-olds, third graders. And we were very active in church. So I walked in, and my preacher was there.
Were you shocked?
I was shocked. So I can't
Did you
tell
think he was an alcoholic?
No, I knew he was there for Robert.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
because Robert came up, hey, and talked to us and told us it
Okay,
was
so
his...
did Robert think you were there for him?
No.
Okay.
No, he didn't really know why, but the next day at church, so needless to say, it was a speaker meeting. I don't know who was the speaker or what was being said, but the next day at church, Robert went up to my husband and he said, "Now it was okay that Bobbie Nell was here last night, went to that meeting, but she can't go to the closed meetings with you." And so my husband said, "Oh, she's the one that's got the problem, not me."
Oh, okay. Now, how about your preacher? So that was another, when you saw him, now you've been seen again.
I think maybe my preacher may have thought that we were there for Robert.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I stayed away from him.
Some plausible deniability anyway.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Okay.
Right.
So did the AA, did it stick? Did you keep going?
I did keep going. The next night we went to the alumni, and it was a speaker, a regular meeting. I picked up a white chip. I said, "I'm not going to drink again." And my husband had a problem with my drinking. I had reached his bottom. I still I could not imagine a life without drinking or doing something.
So you're doing it, but you weren't fully believing that.
I wasn't fully believing. So when I left that meeting the night I picked up a white chip, I went home and smoked a joint, which Randy was okay if I smoked a little bit. I loved the fellowship of AA. I loved the people because they understood me. They would talk about things that I understood. They drank the way I drank. They didn't judge. And I was able to quit drinking. I didn't drink any alcohol for probably 3 years and 3 months. I did not drink any alcohol. But what happened, during that time, I was a sponsor. I was a sponsee. I did a 5th step, and my life got better because Randy and I were not fussing over the alcohol. But he didn't know about how much I was smoking pot. Eventually what happened was kind of where I worked, the people in the warehouse, they were druggies. And a druggie can spot a druggie.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew that I smoked pot. So this guy offered me some cocaine one day. And I thought, well, I'm not going to like this because I want something that's going to mellow me out and bring me down.
Yes.
I wanted to depress it. But I did it anyway. But let me back up a couple of weeks before I did it. My husband told me, by this time he knew I was smoking a lot of pot. And he said, does your sponsor know how much pot you smoke? I'm like, sure she does.
Sure she does.
Sure she does. And, I was going to AA meetings, and I was, I was talking the talk. I had read the book. I knew what it said, and I could talk the talk. I chaired meetings, and...
What was that doing to you internally?
Oh, it was terrible because, I was still in that place. If you really knew me, if you knew me, you wouldn't like me. Mm-hmm. So it was just that pretense. But... So when the guy in the warehouse offered me let me back up. My husband told me 2 weeks before I did cocaine, he said, if you ever do cocaine, you're out of here. Because he knew that some of the people I hung around with, family, were heavily involved with the cocaine. And so within 2 weeks of that, I tried it when the fellow in the warehouse offered it to me. So I tried it that time, and it was just okay. Tried it again, it was just okay. By the 3rd or 4th time, I went to him one day. I said, have you got any more of that Coke? And he said, I have some, but you'll have to buy it this time. Can't afford to give it to you. So that started that.
It was the trap.
It was the trap. It didn't take me very long to reach my bottom with that. I would say probably 6 months. At first, I would only allow myself to have it on Wednesday and Friday. Wednesday, my husband went to church. Mm-hmm. Friday was just a party day. We'd hang out with my sister. Randy at this time was working till 7:30 at night, so I could get it when I got off at 5 o'clock and use it by the time he got home. My use increased. Eventually, I had to quit going to meetings because y'all would know that I was geeked.
People would,
yeah.
And I'm sure financially, this has put you in even a bigger mess than you were in before.
It was terrible. By this time, I had to close my checking account. I would get my check. I was the bookkeeper at work. We were supposed to get paid on Fridays. Once the boss signed the checks, he would give them back to me to distribute on Wednesday. So I would always get my check early, and I would take it to the bank. I would cash it. I would keep out enough what Randy said was an allowance. I would keep out enough, to make it a few days and give him the rest. And then I caught myself stealing my own money out of his wallet. And, because the cocaine was costing me $40 a day, which to some people didn't seem like that much. But when you only made $300 a week, $40 a day was a lot. Plus, I was having to keep up with the pot. I was spending $80 a week on that.
So you're keeping a double life from your family.
Absolutely.
A double life from AA and from work. Mm-hmm. And your kids.
and church.
How was that beginning to wear on you internally? What was happening inside you then?
I hated me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I would look in the mirror, and I remember going to the bathroom one day at work, and I washed my hands, and I looked up in the mirror, and I was disgusting to myself, and I knew I was spiraling. The more I used, the more I hated myself. The more I hated myself, the more I used. Could not stand feeling who I was.
But despite the spiral, you kept everything going?
I tried.
Mm-hmm.
I tried. I knew in June. By this time, my family wasn't really that important to me. My daughter was 19. She was in college. My son was 16, and he was in high school but working. I was living such a double life that I was taking better care of my drug life than I was my family life, even though I loved them.
Right.
I loved my husband, but I was not taking care of it.
So when does this cave in on itself?
I was going to tell you, and I forgot where I was going with that thought. In June of that year, I went into treatment in September. In June, I knew that I was beyond repair, to the point of my coat dealer offered me some crack one day. And I said, no, because I knew that if I tried it, I would be hooked. I knew that I was totally an addict and an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. By this time, I started back drinking because the cocaine, I had to have something to bring me down.
Yes.
Never would allow myself to go back to the brown liquor because that was my drink of choice. I would drink wine coolers, things like that.
But you had to hide that.
I had to, oh yes. I would go to the store that was 5 minutes from my house, buy a 4-pack or a 6-pack of wine coolers and guzzle them and throw the bottles out the window before I got home. I was all about guzzling.
Yeah.
Or I would buy NyQuil and drink it because that wasn't liquor.
Yeah.
It doesn't count.
I could justify it, right?
Yes.
It doesn't count.
But you're wrestling with multiple deal breakers from your husband's perspective.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I had took money that he had no idea. I would steal from his wallet. My son, I had gotten him a job where I worked, and his first paycheck, I stole $40 out of his wallet. Stole from my mother, who was on Social Security. I mean, in my mind, I was not a thief, but I was such a thief. And I would do that stuff and just block it out. But I knew, but I would just block it out. And the only way I knew to block it was with the drugs. So I made a decision that summer that I knew. I had been around AA. I had heard about treatment centers, and it seemed like to me the people that went to treatment first were making it. So I made a decision that I knew I needed to go to treatment, but I was not going to go until I lost my husband or my job.
Okay.
Wow, okay.
Eventually what happened, in September, I was making a drug deal with someone in the warehouse, and someone else saw it and reported it to my boss. He went to my boss and demanded that he told my boss this is happening a lot. And so he demanded that my boss could ask for a drug screen. But I was the HR rep also.
Oh, no.
So when the drug screens came back, they would always come back to me. MedTrends, which we used to do the drug screens, would always fax them, and I would get them back. So I came up with in my head, I'm not going to get a drug screen, but I'm going to white it out, the person's name that has the clean drug screen, and fax it back through the machine and put my name in there. But see, I never did it because I thought that well, this isn't going to happen. There again, I put it out of my head. So my boss asked me to take a drug screen, and I didn't go.
You didn't go.
I didn't go. This was like on a Tuesday or whatever, and the next day he asked me about the drug screen, and he said, I don't know why your results hadn't came back. And I said, I don't either. And, pretended there again that it was just going to go away. It was going to be dropped. And so the next day he asked me about it, and he sent me home. He said, you just need to go home until we can get this straightened out. So I went home. This was on a Thursday. And he called me later that afternoon. He said, I've talked with MedTrends. He said, you didn't take the drug screen, did you? And I said, no, I didn't. I said, Carl, I'm in AA, because I wasn't going at the time, but everybody thought I was still going. That's why I didn't take the drug screen. But when he said that, he said, you didn't go, did you? I said, no. He said, what are you going to do now? I said, I think I'll go into treatment. And that moment of relief,
Yes.
that hope, I just knew I was going to be okay.
What was his reaction when you said that?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
That was moving on.
Moving on, right? So we had a camping trip planned that weekend. And I thought, well, this is my last hurrah. So we went camping. I drank. I did some coke. I smoked some pot, knowing that when I got home on Monday that I was going to go to treatment.
Was your husband on that trip?
My husband was on that trip, but
What do you
I was
think about it?
sneaking.
Okay.
He didn't know I was doing all of that. I could hide it.
So you were still holding the double life. You were holding on
Oh,
for
yes.
dear life.
A quiet last hurrah.
Absolutely. I bought a pint of vodka, and we had a camper, and I wrapped it up in a towel and hid it in a drawer. And this was we left like on Friday, and before that night, that vodka was gone. So I ran out pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get away with it?
I got away with it. Yeah, that was one of our problems.
Yeah. You were good at it.
I was good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at this point, you've told me this is when you called the Commencement Center.
Right.
And you came up here and talked to Jim Heinzman.
Right. That whole weekend, I never told Randy I had lost my job. So that Monday morning, he went to work and the kids went to their places, and I came to the Commencement Center and talked to Jim, told him what was going on, and he told me I qualified. And
You checked some
I'd say-
boxes.
I checked some boxes. So he wanted me to stay, and I said I can't. My family don't know, that I'm hooked on cocaine.
Because at this point, Commencement Center was an inpatient treatment.
It was an inpatient.
So he wanted you to stay, just check in right then as an
Right.
inpatient.
He said history was that if people left, they had that moment of clarity that came. If they ever left, most of the time they would not come back. So I left and I went home. And I can picture this right now. I set my suitcase out. He had told me the things to bring, and I started packing my suitcase. And I started waiting one by one for my family to get home. My daughter was the first to come in, and I told her what was going on. She was going to a Christian college. She went to Emmanuel College. Then my son came home, so one by one they came in. When my husband got home, I just told him as soon as he walked in the door, I said, I'm hooked on cocaine, and I'm going to treatment, and I've lost my job, and I'm going in the morning. I called my sister and my brother-in-law. This is the one that I'm best friends with today. I called them and my mom over and I talked to them, and I can remember my mom saying, "You sure have been a disappointment to this family."
That's tough.
Yeah, it was tough. So I had made up my mind, and I had received a gift. I believe today it was a gift of desperation. And the next morning I was sitting at my vanity, and my husband came by. And he couldn't say anything. He just put his hand on my shoulder. Mm-hmm. I didn't know where his reaction was going to be. You know, I didn't know if I was going to have a home to go to, but I was so tired. I was just ready. I was so tired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At that point, were you feeling relieved? Were you feeling scared?
I was relieved.
Yeah.
I was, I knew I could get help. I just knew it was going to take that breaking point.
Yeah.
And I was just so relieved it was finally there.
When you finally let your kids know that you were going, were they shocked and surprised, or were they kind of not surprised? What was it? Were they in on it? Did they know anything?
I don't think they knew anything. I remember my son telling me one time that he had told our youth pastor that he thought his mom was smoking a lot of pot. Mm-hmm. And the youth pastor said, "No way.
No way.
No way.
That couldn't be.
No, because I could be holy at church, you know.
That double life, we're good at it.
Oh, yeah, I could raise my hand with the best of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're in treatment finally.
I'm in treatment finally.
Did it feel like coming home?
I felt like I was at summer camp.
Okay.
Yes. I felt guilty because I thought my husband is at home dealing with all of this stuff, because I had told him the night before, I don't know what your checking account looks like.
Oh, yeah.
There's no savings bonds left in the safe deposit box. All of this stuff that I had to come clean with. I was so ready to get all of that out of me. I just told him everything the night before I went into treatment.
That just must have been such a relief.
It was a relief. But the first 7 days, they would not allow us to have any contact with the outside. And I was so focused on recovery. I just wanted it so bad. And at the end of in the beginning of the 8th day, I was allowed to call home. I called my job, which I didn't have anymore. I called my boss. For some reason, I called my friend who I bought pot from. I don't know why I called her. Now I see what a crazy thing that was. But anyway, at the end of that day, I felt so unfocused. And I thought, what happened? So I was talking to my counselor, and I had realized, I had gotten back into that outside world.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so I was going to have to start learning how to deal with the outside. When I was about, I had been in there about a week and a half, Dr. Tumling came in. He came around every morning to check on us. And he came in and he shook my hand, which I found out later that was a way to see if I had sweaty palms, to see if I was having withdrawals.
Things.
He was. And he had shook my hand, and he had my chart in his hand, and he said, "How are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm doing good," because I was at summer camp. I was doing good. And he took his chart and slammed it down on my bed. He said, "You're doing better than you're feeling." And I knew that I was still shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I knew that I was still, and that was a turning point for me in treatment. Another turning point, they had done a psychological evaluation. And one night I was walking back to my room, and the nurse said, "Have you seen your psychological evaluation?" I said, "No." And she said, "Well, here's a copy of it." And I started reading it, and it talked about this girl that I always wanted to be. And it said, I would never hurt anyone. If you put me on a deserted island, by the end of the night, me and all the animals would be having a party because I enjoyed life. I wanted recovery. And if I would stay close to the recovery community, that I could have a life really worth living. I couldn't imagine what a life really worth living was like.
Tell us about that first family night in treatment.
Yeah, I had had no contact with my family. And this was the end of day 7. And Dr. Tumlin, Randy worked late, and they had communication with him, and I knew that he was invited. Had no clue if he was going to show up. I had no clue that if I had a family left, if I had a home to go to, but I didn't care. I was going to be okay. So, like I said, I was in 10 on recovery, so I was up close to the front row, and Dr. Tumlin was giving his lecture, and I heard some commotion in the back of the room. And I turned around, and Randy was there. And I loved him so much. And, I was kind of scared. When I went into treatment, I was shut down. I didn't know if I was really in love with this. I just didn't know how I was going to feel. But it was so good to feel anything. Mm-hmm. But I loved him so much, and he was there.
Yeah.
I knew we had a chance.
He just sounds like a magnificent person.
He is. We've been married 53 years.
Wow.
Only by the grace of God and the fellowship of AA. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you, at that point, that's day 7, and how did the rest of treatment go?
It was wonderful. I'd say wonderful. We had group every morning. I had counseling sessions. We went to meetings every day. When the first time I went back into a meeting, I was really big, and not big, but I went to the noon cob. I was a regular there pre-treatment.
Right.
And I was friends with Philip Morris. I can say his name now because he has gone on. And I was friends with him. And the first day I went back in there, and I had this armband on, and he said, I knew we was going to see you back in here. He said, but I could tell the way you talked about your sister. He said, your eyes would just light up when you talked about your sister and the things that she did. He said, I could tell you weren't done.
All right, so you complete treatment successfully, and then it's about you got to transition back to real life.
Right.
What happened?
Right. I was taught in treatment to focus on the solution. When I got out of treatment, they gave me a plan, a release plan.
Okay.
And it was a list of things that I did. I had gotten a sponsor, which I only kept for probably a couple of months. But I had gotten a sponsor in treatment, so I was to call her, which I didn't do very well. I read the big book. I went to a meeting every day. I was just focused on the solution. I didn't. God removed that obsession. I don't know why, but the day that I walked in the treatment center, I can honestly say I have not had a craving or an obsession to drink or use since.
Wow.
Did you just assume your role as wife and mother in running the house again?
I did. And I remember my mother told me my mother would go over, and because Randy worked at night, so when I was in treatment, she would go over during the daytime and, take care of the laundry, and she would cook dinner or whatnot. So when I got home, she said, I could have cleaned your house really, really good, because needless to say, it had been neglected. I could clean your house really, really good, but I think you needed something to work on while you were here. So the first 2 weeks were pretty much looking for a job and going to meetings, cooking, just doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get a job?
I did. I got a job it was a temporary job. It was in called Miriu, but it was an animal vaccine place, and I got a job filling in for a lady that was going on maternity leave in accounting, and I worked there for only about a month. After I had been there 2 weeks, my old boss called me back.
Oh.
And they wanted to offer me my job back. I had to go back with stipulations. I had to go to aftercare, which I was doing. I loved aftercare. I had to be subject to drug screens at any time.
Sure.
Had to go to my meetings.
Was all that accountability good for your early sobriety?
Absolutely. Any insurance that I had that would ensure that maybe, one more thing to keep me sober, one more reason to stay sober. When I had been sober 2.5 years, we decided to build a house. And my husband said, we will build this house on the agreement, if you ever drink or drug, you're out of here. No equity, nothing. And to me, since then, people have said, wow, that must have been very degrading. And I'm like, no, it was just a little bit more insurance for me. I appreciated that accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Fine.
How about, did your mother change her tune from saying that you were a disappointment?
She did.
How'd that go?
She never said anything about it after that, me being a disappointment. She was very grateful that I was getting help. She supported me. She's always came to my AA birthdays. She's not able now.
Right.
She's 96 years old. She has dementia, and I'm very much a part of her life. She lives with my sister, but yeah, we have a great relationship.
You mentioned to me that there was a shift around 10, 12 years into your sobriety. What happened?
Got good. That's what I always wanted to be. I wanted to be good, because to me it was about good and bad, not sick and well.
Mm-hmm.
So I got good, and I guess I had quit working the steps. I was working with a sponsor. I was not working with a sponsor. I had a sponsor, but I was not using her. I was dissatisfied with my job, and this is the job that I went back to, and I stayed there for 11 more years. So I became dissatisfied with that, and I changed jobs. When I changed jobs, I could not go to the noon meetings anymore. And my preacher had asked me, we were, still involved in church. My preacher knew, he was a chaplain at a recovery house, and he knew that I was in recovery. I had shared with him. And so he had asked me about starting an AA meeting at our church. And I was like, there is no way that people are going to come out to Colbert to an AA meeting. But he stayed after me for about 6 months, and finally I said, okay, I'll give it a try. So I started the Colbert meeting. Well, the Colbert
Which
meeting...
still meets today.
It still meets today. We're about to celebrate our 23rd anniversary.
That's
That's
amazing.
amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
It is amazing. But it became the meeting, to get, how meetings ebb and flow. I mean, it became the meeting, and everybody was coming out from Athens, and we had some big names coming out, and so I started in the meetings. Well, I wasn't working with my sponsor, first of all, and in the meetings I would not listen to the content. I was like counting how many people was there, listening to how much silence there was between shares, because I wanted every, and I just quit working on me. I became dissatisfied with life. I started looking for that outside thing again to make me feel good. I can remember at one point I was obsessed with black and white shirts. I had to have every black and white shirt. So I was looking for that thing to fill my hole again. But I was only going to Colbert. And, it was like, I don't drink. I had quit smoking. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't cuss.
And you mean cigarettes?
Cigarettes, yeah, cigarettes. And I started this meeting that is booming, what I did was I edged God out.
That's an acronym for ego, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Ease God out.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what I did. So I started having all the discomfort, just a lot of the, things that we feel when we go a dry drunk. I was starting to not like myself again, maybe not be so nice. And
So what happened with that? So that's a trend that could end badly. What happened?
it end badly. They say that when you relapse, you go spiritually, mentally, and then physically. Only by the grace of God, I didn't go to that third one. I did not take a drink of drugs. I reached my bottom with it and realized that I needed something. One of the turning points was another thing that I was doing. I was very involved in a women's retreat, and I would go twice a year. Well, I had made it to the committee, that put this on. So I had been probably involved maybe 5 years with this retreat. And I went, this was in the fall, and I went, and this girl that was from Greenville that I had gotten pretty tight with up there, she said, "What's going on, Bobbie?" She said, you're just not yourself. You're not the Bobbie that I remember. So I got a new sponsor.
Okay, that's what I want to know is like, how did you get back into being the Bobbie that you really are?
I got a new sponsor. The new job that I had taken because I was dissatisfied with, I left it. I stayed there for 14 months. One of the things the stories about where I worked, I had gotten good, and I had heard that this girl had started back smoking. So one day I was walking across the parking lot and I saw her out there smoking a cigarette. And I thought, she is such a fool to start back smoking. Within 2 weeks of that, I started back smoking. See, I was looking for something.
Yes.
Looking for something to fill that, but I had took credit for being able to stop smoking cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But I got a sponsor. I changed jobs. I started going back to the noon meetings, started working on me. I had one special person in recovery that started coming to my house every Monday and Thursday, and we would walk before the meetings, just get back in the middle of the boat.
I know you've experienced a lot in sobriety because you've been sober for how many years now?
32.
32 years.
Wonderful.
And I know that health problems have been an issue for you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I've always been active, exercise, try to stay off the sugar. Don't do a really good job with that. But, I've always been conscious of what's going on with me. And in 2013, I guess, I got sick. I got pneumonia, ended up in the hospital, and I told my doctor, I said, "I think I have rheumatoid arthritis." And he said, "No, you don't have rheumatoid." But I kept the pneumonia for a couple of weeks, I kept going back to the doctor. They kept doing chest x-rays. I still had the pneumonia. So at the end of December, he said, "Looks like you're all clear, you're well." And I said, "Okay, that's great." So about 2 weeks after that, I ended up with pneumonia again in the hospital, and they called in a pulmonary, and she walked in and she said, "What do you think's going on?" I said, "Well, I think I have rheumatoid arthritis." And she said, "You're absolutely right." So the rheumatoid was affecting, it was going to my lungs, attacking my lungs. And, my joints were terrible, my shoulders, my hands, my hips. So I was having a pretty difficult time walking and getting around. One day I was walking through the living room and it was hurting. And the thought occurred to me, is this the way I'm going to be? And I said, if this is as good as it gets, it's good enough. Because, you know, I like being healthy. I like being active. But it's really about the spiritual being. And I don't know if I've talked enough about the spiritual being in this talk, but it's, you know, to me, the steps brought me to the 12th step. Is I had a spiritual awakening. And if I'm okay on the inside, it don't matter if these legs will get me around or not. But from that moment, I started getting better.
Oh.
And today I can walk 2 miles a day. You know, I don't have the joint pain. I hadn't had pneumonia since then. And
your body's a vessel.
yes, I have to take medication twice a day, but it's okay. It's not mood altering.
And then in 2016, you had a heart attack.
I did. I started with it. I felt like I had indigestion really bad, and I stayed awake all night. I told my daughter, I said, I just really don't feel good, you know. And she started the next day. I called her. I said, I still have indigestion. She said, I think you need to go to the doctor. I said, no, I'm okay. You know, I kept telling her, and she insisted I go to the doctor. So that afternoon, about 2:00, Randy and I went to the urgent care, and I told him I had shingles like 3 weeks before, and I told him, I said, I think it's all the medication, the ibuprofen I'm taking for the shingles. And he said, I think you're probably right, but we'll do an EKG just to be sure. Well, they couldn't get the machine to work. So they told my husband, said, we will, you know, I'm going to call her in some medicine, but if you want to take to the emergency room, you can't. So we left her. He said, we're going to the emergency room. And it was about 4:00. And so we walked in the emergency room, and being a heart patient, they took me on back and did an EKG and went back to my room. My daughter had a friend that worked there, and the friend walked in, and she said, have you called your daughter? And I said, no. She said, you better. You're headed to the heart cath. She said, you're having a heart attack.
Oh.
Wow.
You know, I got to the hospital just in time. They told me if I had been there 10 minutes later, I wouldn't have made it.
Wow.
But they were, you know, there was like people coming into the room, and there must have been 5 or 6 nurses around doing. And at one point they said, give her so much of they were going to give me something. And I said, what is that? And she said, morphine. I said, I don't think I need it. And she said, you're not having any pain? I said, no, I'm just sick, you know. So they didn't give me the morphine. But then I went to the heart. But I was sitting there, and I asked my husband to say a prayer for her. And they were doing all of this, and he prayed. And I looked at him. I said, I am not scared. I don't understand. You know, I mean, God had just gave me this peace that when you think about it, you're laying on a gurney, you're headed to the heart cath. Randy had bypass surgery. I went through that in recovery, and he'd had bypass surgery. I didn't know if that's what I was going to have. But just, you know, that song, I got the peace that passeth understanding down in my heart.
Mm-hmm. You've pretty much come to terms with you can go through anything and stay sober.
I can.
And stay at peace.
Yeah.
How does that shape the way you live today?
I don't have fear for the future. You know, I want to control my grandkids, of course. I want to control my kids, of course. My granddaughter she's at college right now. She's a pitcher on the softball team. But the year that she was a senior, I thought, she is not going to keep that starting position because she was the pitcher, and they had another girl that I thought, well, she's going to come in and take her place. She's going to, you know, they ended up every game. I was worried that Bailey was going to lose her position. You know, she was not going to be the pitcher. They ended up going 39-1 that year. Bailey, they won the state championship for
Wow.
high school.
That's exciting.
Bailey got the state pitcher of the year. And I thought back to that. You know, I worried and tried to control that whole thing, that whole fall. And I thought about, wow, I could have had the best time if I had just let that go. So that was a good lesson for me.
Mm-hmm.
But so living without fear, being able to be a mom today that I always wanted to be, being able to be a nana. You know, I've got 3 granddaughters that they're 25, 20, almost 21, and 20, and I have a wonderful relationship. The 21-year-old.
And they've never seen you drunk.
They've never seen me drunk.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. The 21-year-old called me a few weeks ago, and she said, Nana, I need to talk to you. And she said, and you always give good advice. I mean, to me, that is...
You've come a long way, baby.
I've come a long way, baby. Yes, I have. And then to be able to, you know, my son is in recovery, and he doesn't mind that I mention him. Just to be able to have been an attraction to him. Mm-hmm. You know, I didn't pound it into his head.
You were just an example.
I was just an example, right? Mm-hmm. And he's a juvenile diabetic, and I knew that the drinking was really bad for him. By the time he got here, the night before he came in, he had said that he would, kind of like me, I will go in tomorrow morning, but he said, just let me drink as much as I want to drink tonight. And I knew that could kill it. I went to bed that night, and I kept thinking, I don't know if I can go to bed. How am I going to sleep knowing, you know, that David is over there? And I went to bed that night, and I said a prayer. And I went to bed, sleep, and I slept like a baby. And then next morning, you know, he called, and I said, you going to treatment? He said, yeah, but I got this headache, and I'm nauseated. I said, do you have any liquor? He said, yeah. I said, well, drink it. So he went into treatment that day, and he loves Alcoholics Anonymous, and I knew he would, because he was like me. He was very involved in the church. But couldn't get that spiritual angle in the church, that concept, couldn't get rid of those prejudice that we had against that old God that we had to be good enough for. Mm-hmm. So he loves the fellowship of AA.
That is great. So, as a nana who gives good advice, what advice do you have for people who are struggling right now?
To believe. To go ahead and believe now. I knew that I was alcoholic, and I took that first step, admitted I was powerless. I knew I was powerless. I knew my life was unmanageable, but I would not believe that it would work for me. I thought I was a weak person. I was like my daddy. That was just the life that I was destined to have. I couldn't be good enough. And once I decided to go into treatment, that belief entered my heart. And just don't take a drink today.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, just don't do it today.
So, one final thought I was wondering, I want to know, and then mostly for those who are listening who, like Brendan said, are struggling, what are the beliefs and practices that you have today that keep you sober? And what is the essence of recovery to you?
Today, I believe I am as much an alcoholic as I was when I got here. I have drinking dreams still. Every day, in the mornings, I say a prayer. I read something in recovery. I get tons of gratitude lists. I'm not very good at, like I said earlier, I'm not a writer. So I'll send a couple a week, but I try to keep my physical body. I go to a lot of meetings. Colbert Group is my home group. I go to High Noon. Sometimes I'll go with my son. He has a different home group. He has his own program. I work with a sponsor. I have 8 sponsees. I love working with sponsees. I have one that has 29 years. I have one that has 20 years. You know, they've got some recovery. And so they help me as much as I help them. The essence of recovery to me is, like I said earlier, that 12th step. See, I wanted to get good, and then I would get sober. And when I came into this program, I started working those steps. First step 1, second step 2, started working them in order. And behind every step, there's a spiritual principle. And so I started, working on the honesty and the hope and the willingness. And eventually, I had that spiritual awakening. And that's the essence of recovery to me. A relationship with God. Actually being able to go into church today and worship. It took me a while to get back to that God at church. Making this a way of life. And it is, like I said earlier, it's just a way of life for me, my husband, now my son, my daughter. My daughter and I have a fantastic relationship.
Well, thank you, Bobbie, for coming today and sharing with us so honestly and openly. Thank you.
We really do appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us today and for listening to Bobbie Ray's story of long-term sobriety. Her experience reminds us that recovery is not just about getting sober. It's about continuing to grow, to show up, and to live with intention over time. Every story of recovery lights the path for someone else. Thank you for being here and for supporting the essence of recovery. We support you on your journey, and we look forward to continuing this work together in the episodes ahead.
Until next time, may the light you found here guide you forward, and may your own story, whether you're just beginning or many years into recovery, shine for someone who needs it. This podcast is sponsored by the Athens Area Commencement Center in Athens, Georgia. Thank you for being here.